Living in Sunnyside Estates wasn't my first choice, but the location was perfect for my commute, and the walking trails provided an ideal environment for Maverick, my service dog. Maverick is a beautiful golden retriever who helps me manage my PTSD episodes after my military service overseas. He's incredibly well trained, always wears his service vest when we're out, and follows commands perfectly. I know the Americans with Disabilities Act like the back of my hand. It's important when you rely on a service animal, but I never imagined I'd need to cite federal law to my HOA president. The first time I met Karen Whitfield, she was carrying a clipboard and wearing a scowl that seemed permanently etched onto her face. She introduced herself as the president of the HOA with a tone that suggested I should be impressed. "I don't believe I approved a dog in this community," she said with narrowed eyes, looking down at Maverick, who was sitting perfectly still beside me. I politely explained that Maverick was a service dog, not a pet, and therefore exempt from pet restrictions under federal law. She huffed, muttered something about people always finding loopholes, and walked away. I should have recognized the warning signs right then. Over the next few weeks, I received 3 separate notices about alleged violations. My grass being a quarter-inch too tall, my mailbox being the wrong shade of black, and my garbage can being visible from the street for approximately 45 minutes after collection. Each notice was signed with Karen's elaborate signature, complete with a smiley face that felt more threatening than friendly. I complied with everything, not wanting to cause trouble, but I had a feeling these petty infractions were just the beginning. Then came the HOA meeting where Karen proposed a new rule requiring all animals, including service animals, to be registered with the board and to wear HOA-approved identification. When I raised my hand and mentioned that this conflicted with the Americans with Disabilities Act, she cut me off and said that federal laws don't override community standards. Several neighbors looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. After the meeting, Karen approached me and whispered, "If you want to be difficult, I can be difficult too." Her breath smelled like coffee and intimidation. The following weekend, I was enjoying a peaceful morning on my front porch with Maverick resting at my feet. I was reading the newspaper when a shadow fell across my lawn. Karen stood there in her signature khaki shorts and polo shirt, holding a spray bottle. "Your dog is violating the new pet ordinance by not having proper HOA identification," she said loudly enough for my neighbors to hear. I calmly reminded her that Maverick was a service dog protected by federal law and that the HOA couldn't legally require special identification. "Besides," I added, "that rule hasn't even been officially implemented yet." Her face turned an alarming shade of red. "I'm tired of you military types thinking you're above the rules," she spat out, advancing toward my yard. "If you won't comply, I'll handle this myself." Before I could react, she aimed her spray bottle at Maverick and sprayed him directly in the face with some kind of liquid. Maverick yelped and backed away, pawing at his eyes. I immediately jumped up, moved between them, and demanded to know what was in the bottle. "Just a little vinegar and water solution," Karen said with a smirk. "It won't hurt him, but maybe now he'll learn to respect authority." I was absolutely livid, but years of military training had taught me to remain calm under pressure. I took Maverick inside, rinsed his eyes thoroughly, and made sure he was okay. The vinegar solution had irritated his eyes, but thankfully there was no lasting damage. Once I was certain Maverick was comfortable, I called the police. 911, "What's your emergency?" the dispatcher asked. I reported the assault on my service dog, making sure to mention that interfering with a service animal is a federal offense. The dispatcher took my information and said officers would be dispatched immediately. 20 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived at my door. I explained the situation, showed them Maverick's service animal certification and training documentation, and pointed out Karen's house across the street. One officer stayed to take my detailed statement while the other went to speak with Karen. From my window, I could see her gesturing wildly, her face contorted with indignation. The officer seemed unimpressed by her theatrics. When both officers returned, they informed me that Karen had admitted to spraying Maverick but claimed she was enforcing community standards. They explained that they had informed her that interfering with a service animal is indeed a federal offense under the Americans with Disabilities Act, punishable by significant fines and potential jail time. Moreover, her actions constituted animal cruelty under state law. They were placing her under arrest and asked if I would be willing to press charges. Without hesitation, I said yes. Karen was escorted to the police car in handcuffs, screaming about how she would have me evicted and how the entire neighborhood would turn against me. Several neighbors had come outside to witness the commotion, and I heard one of them whisper, "She's finally gone too far." Another neighbor approached me afterward and apologized for not speaking up at the meeting. "We've all been intimidated by her for too long," she admitted, glancing at Maverick, who had recovered from his ordeal and was back to his calm, attentive self. The legal process moved surprisingly quickly. Karen was charged with interference with a service animal, animal cruelty, and harassment. Her initial court appearance was a spectacle. She arrived in designer clothes with an expensive lawyer who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted against her. The judge was particularly stern when reviewing the case, noting that community rules never supersede federal law, especially when it comes to disability accommodations. While awaiting trial, an emergency HOA meeting was called. I attended with Maverick, and to my surprise, nearly every homeowner in the community showed up. The vice president of the board called for a vote of no confidence in Karen's leadership, citing her reckless actions that have exposed our community to legal liability. The vote was unanimous. Karen was removed from the board effective immediately. Someone had even printed new name tags for the board members' table, and Karen's was conspicuously absent. The criminal case concluded with Karen pleading guilty to a reduced charge in exchange for avoiding a longer jail sentence. The judge sentenced her to 30 days in county jail, a $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service at an animal shelter, and mandatory education classes on disability rights. As the sentence was read, Karen's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, a dawning realization of the consequences of her actions. "But I was just enforcing the rules," she protested weakly as the bailiff approached. The judge leaned forward and replied, "The most important rule, Ms. Whitfield, is to respect the law of the land, which protects service animals and the people who depend on them." As Karen was led away to begin her jail term, our eyes met briefly across the courtroom. The entitlement and superiority that had once defined her expression were gone, replaced by the humbled look of someone who had finally encountered a rule she couldn't bend or break. She mouthed something that might have been, "This isn't over," but we both knew it was. Maverick sat beside me, perfectly poised and attentive, the very image of the service dog professional he was. I reached down to scratch behind his ears, and he leaned into my hand, a small gesture of partnership that had weathered an unexpected storm and come out stronger on the other side.